This video is brought to you by Grandeur Warranty, your #1 online source for factory-backed extended warranties in the country. Nissan is doing something huge. They're bringing the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada Pro 4X Off-Road Edition full-size SUVs, and they have really high hopes. And this is also the same as the Patrol from overseas.
That's great, Andre. But my question, can it beat the biggest seller in the category, the Chevy Tahoe, and this one specifically, a 2025 Tahoe Z71?
Which has also been refreshed.
Yeah,
for 2025.
Also a new SUV.
Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's go feature for feature, spec for spec. Let's drive them and find out. First thing first, the exterior of the new Armada is fresh and new. Also, the frame is new underneath, but the size, I think, is just right because the wheelbase on this new Armada is 121.1 inches, and it's a 3-row SUV that's properly sized, I think.
Well, if you think that's properly sized, then you'll think the same of the Tahoe, because the Tahoe is a wheelbase of 120.9 inches, so 0.2 inches more maneuverable, I'd argue, Andre. Really, it makes almost no difference.
Yeah.
But they are pretty much the same length in wheelbase.
And I think it's very important. Like you said, the Tahoe is the best-selling 3-row truck-based SUV in the country. If you combine Suburban, GMC Yukons, Cadillac Escalades, they're approaching 300,000 trucks a year. So it behooves Nissan, I think, to learn from this.
Absolutely.
Right? And do something for themselves.
This is really the benchmark when it comes to SUVs for that reason.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about power and then get to capability, right? There used to be a V8 underneath the hood of the Armada, but no more.
That's true. We've now got a twin-turbo 3.5-liter V6.
It says it right there.
With a pretty impressive power output, Andre.
Yeah, it actually does not require premium fuel. On 87 octane, Nissan rates it at 425 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. If you compare it to another manufacturer, Ford, who have the EcoBoost V6, this is actually more power than available in the Expedition.
Yeah, and that is a very impressive figure. However, over here in the Tahoe, there is no use to have a V8 because it still does. This is the 5.3-liter base engine, 355 horsepower, 383 pound-feet of torque. So admittedly, not as much as the Nissan. You can get a 6.2 with 420 horsepower, 460 pound-feet of torque. There's also the 3-liter Duramax diesel engine option for these trucks. So if you want the most as far as choice for powertrain, you're going to have more options here with the Tahoe. This is also a 10-speed automatic versus a 9-speed in the Nissan. Still a lot of speeds in either one, but one more here.
Well, they might actually have very similar EPA ratings. We don't have the final numbers on the Nissan engine yet, and we'll be doing a lot more efficiency testing on this truck. But I think we need to do a couple things. First, we need to hear these engines run, exhaust note, and also I want to take them for a quick spin. All right, let's go for a little jaunt.
A jaunt? That's a good term.
Well, yeah, so this is a new powertrain. You and I also reviewed the new Infiniti QX80.
We did.
Which also has this twin-turbo setup. But in the Nissan, it makes a little bit less power because of the premium versus not premium fuel.
But it's still a healthy power output that we have here. Pretty impressive.
Let's see.
Yeah, not bad at all, Andre.
For moving a giant vehicle like this?
Yeah, it gets out of its own way.
Yeah, but I think I get what you're saying as far as the exhaust note.
It doesn't sound like much.
It's not trucky. I mean, it's good for an SUV, but this is a truck-based SUV that I expect to have, macho stuff going on.
One thing I do appreciate about it, though, is the ride quality. It's pretty smooth. but it still has a bit of that trucky feel, so it doesn't drive too car-like, which I actually kind of like.
Alrighty, so let me just do a tiny launch. We're kind of here on the dead-end road. So let's see. It revs about 5,500.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like tons of turbo lag to me.
No, and the quick shifting.
Yeah.
So the transmission feels good. The tuning feels good. We've seen about 19 to 20-ish mpg, just driving around. You know, not testing, but just driving around. So, you know what? It's pretty comfy, actually.
I'd say so.
Yeah. By the way, the Nissan Armada, all the current Armadas are built in Japan, and obviously they're shipped here. All of the Tahoes and Suburbans are built in Arlington, Texas.
Which is nice. You know what else is nice, Andre?
What?
Listen to this.
Yeah, that's traditional. That's traditional.
That's the heartbeat of America right there, Andre. The 5.3, which to me, in the real world, makes plenty enough power. You can go for the 6.2 if you really need that extra power, but there's been a couple recalls on that engine recently. You might be a little better off with the 5.3.
Or at least some investigations in something that's happening with that engine. You mentioned when we were looking under the hood the availability of 3-liter diesel, the Duramax.
Yeah.
If this one had the Duramax, I would be sold probably immediately, because the efficiency on the highway, we live in Colorado,
yeah,
the efficiency on the highway is just tremendous.
And the torque is really good too.
Yeah.
It's not the fastest option.
Okay.
And speaking of speed, let's do a little launch.
I like the sound.
Oh yeah. It's not as quick as the Nissan is.
It's not as snappy.
Fair. Especially up here at altitude, because we're over a mile above sea level, so this naturally aspirated engine is not going to make quite as much power as it would at sea level. That affects the forced induction twin turbo V6 a little bit less than it affects a naturally aspirated engine like this. But the sound you get from this motor is good. Ride quality on these coils is also really good, and it's equally as good, if not better, with the air suspension.
Yeah, and generally speaking, like in recent, like Silverado 1500s, I feel like the seats are a little bit hard. I don't know if they're just the same here, but I feel a little bit better, at least sitting in this Tahoe. It's a little bit more comfy.
Yeah, and it's also nice driving around in this SUV because, once again, and similar to the Armada, it feels very substantial. It feels truck-like. It gives you that driving experience that at least I personally want out of an SUV of this size and in this category.
And also, that's why you can pull those trailers, right? I mean, those ratings are real. You know, 8,200 pounds or 8,500 pounds. You know, it's not going to be, you know, at that limit. This vehicle should still deal with it pretty well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention, the world is switching to smaller displacement and turbocharging. We see that in the Armada, right?
But GM's not.
No, GM is not. And they're investing in the next gen, 6th generation LS motors, right? This can be configured. Right now we're running in two-wheel drive only, so you're not spinning as many components. So that's how they get those efficiencies, right?
Yeah.
Two-wheel drive, 10-speed automatic, and a little bit less horsepower is how they get that efficiency. All right, so both of these are also off-road trim. So we got to talk about some of the off-road features. Let's start with the wheels and tires.
Yeah, so we've got Yokohama Geolandar ATs. Not a super aggressive tire, also not a 3-peak snow rated tire. So this is just an M&S rating, and it's also a pretty big wheel, Andre. Yeah,
that's a 20-inch wheel, and the tire size is 275/60 R20, and a lot of manufacturers are actually doing this, including GM. So if we walk over here, we'll see what Chevy is doing. But isn't it better if the wheel was a little bit smaller and the tire was bigger? I think so, because an 18 in my mind is still plenty big enough of a wheel to look good on a modern SUV, but give you some of that extra sidewall.
Here on the Tahoe, we've got a Goodyear Wrangler Territory AT. This is also not a super aggressive tire, maybe a little bit more aggressive than the Geolander, but it's also not 3-peak rated. It's also just an M&S rated tire, and it's also a 20-inch wheel.
Yeah, and the styling, I mean, on both of these trucks is, I think, really spot on, you know, depending on what you like. But I think it would be nicer, like you said, if they went down to 18s on both of these and gave you more sidewall and a beefier tire, too. So the way these two are configured right now, they're a little bit different. But you can configure them closer to each other in price and in equipment. The Armada Pro 4X right here has air suspension, and currently it's lifted up almost to its highest setting. And you can see lots of approach angle. There's skid plates, and look at this. I've got toe points right here. They're painted.
Well, like with a lot of other things on these two, it's like they were designed to match up perfectly because you can also get the Tahoe with air suspension. This one in particular doesn't have it. But I also have skid plates underneath here and red tow hooks just like yourself.
But your tow hooks are poking out a little bit more visibly.
They're a little bit easier to access, which I like.
Well, the outside is new, but also the inside of the Armada is new too.
Yeah, and it's a pretty cool layout. I like the shape of the dash. Everything is kind of squared off, rugged looking. And then we've got a couple of huge screens in front of us.
Humongous, a lot of digital display. Really tall console, but it's got a little cubby underneath. You cannot see it from here. Cup holders, wireless charger. And I also like that not everything is in the screen. You do have some controls for your climate control system, also for high. This does have a full-time four-wheel drive system.
Yep.
So auto, so no two-wheel drive, for high, for low, and a rear locker.
Yeah, rear locker, really nice feature to have. This is a Pro 4X. Like we said, it's an off-road trim, so having that rear locker is really sweet. We've also got a lot of different drive modes that we can select from. Heated and ventilated seats, heated steering wheel, man, there's a bunch.
But this is something I need to get used to if I was to buy this, the piano key shifter for the transmission.
One thing that doesn't take too much getting used to, though, is the fact that we've got an integrated trailer brake controller right there next to the steering column. I think that's a good location for it, and just a really nice feature to have, especially because we tow a lot. One thing that bugs me, though, a little bit, Andre, is we have quite a few buttons on the steering wheel there. It's a little busy in my mind.
And it's also mostly haptic, so it's not actual buttons. It's kind of this haptic situation. But you do have cruise control, of course, volume, a lot of different features you can control. And, of course, 360-degree cameras. And take a look at this. See-through. You could look underneath your vehicle.
Yeah, it's a software-driven system, so it's not an actual camera underneath, but still pretty cool technology to have. Really good camera views.
It's basically remembering. It's taking images of what's underneath it
stitching them
and
together.
stitching them together. Even with the shadow and the complex situation that we have here, it's mostly precise. I mean, not perfect, but okay.
Yeah.
Dude, this looks updated and new.
It does, and once again, we've got some very nice screens here at the center of the dash. They're big, they're high resolution, they're responsive. Got some nice features. We've got heated steering wheel, heated seats. This particular model doesn't have ventilated seats, but again, there are a lot of similarities when you option this Tahoe and that Nissan the same way.
Yeah, for 2025, this is new. They actually changed the shifter. They used to have the piano key situation, their version of it, but now it's kind of a column shift, but electronic shifter.
Yeah, so a more traditional shifter, which is nice. Like we mentioned, this particular one does not have air suspension, but you can get this with air suspension. You can't get it with a selectable rear locker, but you can with an electronic limited slip. This one just has a regular limited slip.
Yeah, and also that's why this is a little bit more affordable, right?
Exactly.
So the sticker price on this model you see right now is about $75,000. Still a lot of money, but it's less, for example, than the Pro 4X. These are expensive trucks.
Absolutely.
SUVs. What happens if you want to keep it for a long period of time and protect your investment?
Well, for people like your buddy John, if you plan on buying one of these SUVs, then we highly recommend you go with this video's sponsor, Granger.
GrangerWarranty.com. And actually, John was just telling me a story. His buddy had a similar Tahoe and had an issue with the airbag system under his suspension after the 3-year warranty ran out.
Yeah.
And he was out a lot of money. So GrangerWarranty.com, they use OEM parts. You could save some money, about $1,000 compared to other places. And this is factory-backed warranty. Well, these are trucks, so it's also about payload, towing, and cargo capacity.
Yeah, and I'm told that there is a hitch hiding underneath the cover here.
Trust me, there is. 8,500 pounds of towing, which is actually pretty competitive.
What about the payload?
1,444 pounds.
Which is not too bad. And as we open up the power lift gate here, we can see behind the second row, we've got the third row folded down. That is something that you can do all electronically, which is pretty nice for both the third and the second row. And because this has air suspension, you can also lift it up or drop it down using some switches here in the trunk. All pretty cool stuff.
It is. But here's how it compares. It's kind of almost a wash. That Tahoe right there, the Z71, has more payload by about 200 pounds.
Right.
But less towing, about 8,200 pounds on this guy.
Yeah, and I guess they also
The hitch is also covered.
The hitch on here. If you're towing a lot, you could just leave it off. I guess it does clean up the rear end a little bit. But if we open up this power lift gate.
And by the way, we really want to thank our friend John for letting us use his Tahoe.
Absolutely.
And he's got a lot of his equipment in here too.
Yeah. And so you can see a little bit of an example of what it would look like if you populate the trunk in the rear of your Tahoe. So a similarly sized space and similarly featured too, because we've also got switches here to fold down the seats.
And we also have
nice.
An outlet, an electrical outlet in both.
Yeah.
And John was telling us, I mean, he can carry a lot of equipment, including an easy up, foldable little tent. And he's also developing his own style of shelf to kind of separate the space.
Yeah, and make the most out of the space that you have. It's a pretty good sized trunk. I would say unless you're going to use the third row a lot and need trunk space, you probably don't need to opt for a Suburban. I think most people would be fine with a vehicle of this size, but they're very similarly optioned between the two.
And the specs, as far as capability, like payload and towing, are within 200 pounds of each other.
Yeah.
And by the way, this Tahoe has captains in the center, but that Armada, let me show you, it has a cool feature. Here in the new Pro 4X, of course, you have specific stitching and specific design, but this is what I love here, is there's a center, so it's basically 40% folding seat. So if you have like skis or something longer you can actually use that in the middle here too.
Yeah, and it's a nice second row as well. The materials are good. We've actually got heated seats all the way back here, which is a nice feature to have. Yeah, I like the materials. I like that we've got USB-C and our own climate controls. It's not a bad place to sit. You've even got your own little sunroof up above, which is all really nice stuff to have for your rear seat passengers. Yeah,
panoramic sunroofs are the latest hit, right? And also, they redesigned this seat so it can fold in a couple different ways. So if you do want to get back here, you can keep your child anchored seat potentially.
Yeah.
And also get into the third row.
You can keep the seat in there, but probably take the child out.
Yeah, the child comes out. Yes.
Andre, the similarities continue because here in the second row, I guess one difference, to be fair, is the captain's chairs, like you pointed out. But we still have climate controls here in the second row. We still have heated seats here in the second row. You pointed out off camera, and I agree with you. I think I like the materials a little bit better in the Nissan.
Yeah, I mean, these seats are okay, but that Pro 4X feels luxurious and very nice.
And as far as folding these to get into the third row, you can give one pull on that lever to flatten it out. Second pull on the lever, tumble it forward. Not too difficult of an operation.
But the seat, where's your child's seat? Now it's squished. You know, that may not work the same.
That's fair.
And also, John has a kind of a powered cooler here, the fridge.
Yeah, plugged into the outlet right here in the second row on the console.
It is nice. So the new Pro 4X version of the Armada starts at around $73,000, but this one has a few bells and whistles added to it, so it's about $80,000 right now, just a little bit over that. And I've been racking my brain between these two. They're so close, but the interior and the torque of this engine and some of the luxury features in here, I think I would choose this one over the Z71 Tahoe.
And I can understand why you would, because the Armada has a lot of really good features, the ones you mentioned. I also love the fact that it has that selectable rear locker. That's a nice thing to have. But then again, I am an American, Andre, and I do like a big V8. So I'm gonna have to go Tahoe Z71. These are just proven, they're dependable. I love the 5.3. I also really like the 3-liter Duramax and the fuel economy that you can get with that. So some of the powertrain options here make it a standout option for me. Yes, this doesn't have a selectable rear locker, but the 4-wheel drive system on this is as good as the size and ground clearance and really everything else on this is really going to allow you to do off-road. So this is as rugged as I think I need an SUV to be. And V8, Andre.
Well, that sound, I gotta agree with you, that burble that we heard,
goes a long way in my heart.
it goes inside the soul.
Yeah, it really does. It warms you.
And of course, I mean, you can configure them at identical prices, right? So it's really about your preference. So let us know what you think in the comments below. Which one would you choose? And we'll see you next time at oldtfl.com.